Hi, Communication 105 students. Today's tutorial is on the difference between informative and persuasive presentations, the difference between informing versus persuading. It is important to know the difference because it can be easy to fall back into an informative presentation when the assignment is to give a persuasive one. I'm going to be referencing page 210 in the text Essential Communication, which I have on the screen for your ease right now. But I hope that you turn back to page 210 after this tutorial. So an informative and a persuasive presentation are different in at least three ways. First, the topic. It tends to be more controversial in a persuasive presentation. The speaker's purpose or reason for conveying the information is often much different too. So you are not simply trying to give good information, you're actually motivated to try to change the audience a little bit. The audience's receptiveness is also different. So people are pretty open during informative presentations because no one is asking them to do anything. But in a persuasive presentation, the audience has to be convinced. And I want you to keep that concept in mind. Ask yourself periodically as you're putting together your presentation, what am I trying to convince my audience to think, believe, or do? Okay, so we're going to start with your text and what it says about an informative presentation. And I think that you'll see up here that an informative presentation tends to be non-controversial. Many students seem to like that a whole lot. An informative speaker does not intend to change the audience, right? So the goal, though, of an informative presentation does not engender conflict. In other words, nobody is going to disagree for the most part. So I also think it's important to notice that your text describes an informative presentation as one that aims to describe, explain, or instruct. Whereas the purpose of a persuasive presentation is to change or motivate someone through communication to change a belief, attitude, or behavior. Additionally, you need to convince someone to think or behave differently. And again, hold on to that concept of convince. All right. For instance, teaching someone to wash their hands properly is much different than convincing them to do it for the public good, to slow down the spread of, say, a virus. Something must be at stake for discourse to be persuasive in nature. Someone has to gain something, in this case, good health in some way. A point that your text makes is that persuasion is usually incremental, if you look down here in the green. When it is successful, persuasion generally succeeds over time. So I want you to imagine that you are contributing to a longer project than just one presentation that changes the world. You are making one presentation about a topic that could change some aspect of the world. And that's different, less stressful, I think. So the speaker is asking the audience to do or to think something new. You could persuade the audience to consider a new point of view. For instance, we'll see that a bit with the notion of gender, right? Some people do not identify with a gender that is strictly masculine or feminine. So we've been asked to consider that gender is a spectrum. That's a mind shift. You may be challenging a widespread falsehood, right, that has injured people. I think that there are some, if you take a look at issues surrounding inoculations, people who promoted the idea that the measles vaccine gave autism set up a persuasive debate about that, where that perception was considered a falsehood that actually injured people by reducing the number of measles vaccinations. You may also find that your goal is to humanize a certain group of people who have been dismissed. So you might consider, for instance, if one of your causes were animals and animal testing, right? You want to humanize, if you will, animals so that people see them differently and not just as lab rats. All right, in this assignment, the signature assignment, you need to ask some questions of your topic. For whom is the topic a controversy? Even if you want to take a topic that appears on the surface or at a first glance to be non-controversial, if you change your purpose and the audience, you may find you can create a persuasive presentation using a topic that is near and dear to your heart and that is about a good health habit. I'm going to use meditation as an example. Okay, so when I say controversial, I do not mean that a topic should ignite hostilities. Not at all. Simply the topic should lend itself to a healthy debate, a discussion about feasibility or effectiveness. Okay, many topics can seem uncontroversial, and in my example of meditation, no one would argue that it started in India in 3500 BC. However, that meditation can be useful in certain environments might be a more controversial way of looking at meditation. So what I did was I went to OneSearch and I typed in meditation, and instead of tutorial I actually typed in prison. And when I did that, I got many topics. And I'm going to pull the screen off to the side here so that you can sort of see what I got. Now I have full text, and I can even scale back and give just scholarly texts on this. And you'll see that actually there is quite a bit. And one of the tests, I think, of a topic and whether or not it can be approached persuasively is to figure out for whom can this be approached persuasively. So I have narrowed the topic by narrowing my scope, and that is looking at meditation in just prisons. How could we use meditation? How could I convince people to use meditation to help prisoners cope better, adjust better, and actually lead healthier lives both inside prison and maybe outside of prison? The audience might reject this idea as not being feasible, so I have to convince them that it is. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now and say that your topic needs to be a little bit controversial, not a whole lot controversial. It needs to convince the audience to think about a topic in a new way or call them into some sort of action. And your purpose must be to convince your audience just a little bit. All right, and that concludes this presentation.